Well, there was a deer a second ago and I just missed it. This is the larger stream with a more deeper gurgly voice. And different stream. Hello, this looks different. No, it doesn't. And I swing on this. Let me see if I can do it one-handed. It's so fun. I don't know who it belongs to, but every time I look up, the house is dark. So I figure that there's nobody to observe me. I did it. Ah. Okay, so one of the things that used to preoccupy me was like whether something is an idol, whether I'm making an idol of it. I think what it means if you make an idol of something is, you put it above God, or in the place of God, and you worship it, love it, serve it, etc. instead of God. However, as I've come to a more full concept of who God actually is, it's become basically, I think, impossible for me to create idols anymore. I don't know how I would go about doing it if I should want to. Instead, I find that I have more and more images, or you could say metaphors or like pictures of God that don't threaten him. And I think that living this way can be very freeing because there's a lot of things in our lives and a lot of, therefore, potential idols. And the way it went for me was, before I kind of started realizing this, everything was a potential threat, and basically everything that I loved, like if I got into a book or an activity, or eventually it became like eating sugar and then just food in general, because that was like all I had left. Basically, I would be suspicious of it and be like, well, that must be an idol because I love it so much, and God is this vague abstraction to me anyway, and I know my heart's deceitful, so better get rid of that, better get rid of that, better get rid of that, and go back to reading the Bible and stuff. And eventually, I of course take things to their logical conclusion, and I ended up like barely eating, but that is the logical conclusion of that line of reasoning. And I think the only true final escape from that isn't in balance or anything else. It's in recognizing who God truly is and making the things in your life that you love, or people, it's more important if it's people, images of God rather than idols. In reality, there's no such thing as an idol. Like, there's nobody else to worship but God, or rather, God is the source of everything, and God is the source of all goodness. And we as humans may not realize it, but even the most vile person who looks to be doing the most depraved things is doing that out of, in essence, out of ignorance, and out of a belief that those things are better, for them at least, or more desirable than what is actually good. So, and making an idol is saying, like, this person or this activity, or this pleasure, this food, my chocolate at night, is good, is better for me than God is, and gives me more pleasure than he can, and therefore I'm going to prioritize it or them. But the flip for me was realizing that those things, it's not that they're set up against God and threatening him with other goods and other pleasures, it's that he made them, they're from him, and they are actually like expressions of and pictures of his goodness, his truth, his beauty, and the pleasure that is in him. So not just a thing of, oh, I love chocolate, but I love Jesus more, but I love chocolate, and God made that through all, and made the humans with the ingenuity to make it, and that gave me, through all of the myriad processes that had to occur for me to have this chocolate, which I now consume and my tongue to, be able to taste it. And so, I eat it and I really enjoy it. And I'm like, again, with my wider definition of prayer, eating it is really an act of worship and of praise and thanks toward God, and enjoying how good He is, as expressed to my senses in my language, in my baby little human terms, in the way that I understand it, by how good this chocolate is. And as we get up into more the realms of like relationships, that becomes, I think, even more important. Because so it becomes a thing of like, instead of worshiping God more than the other things in your life, or not worshiping them, the way that I live now, and that has really so helped me, is to worship God through the other good things in my life, and through not even the other good things, through the things in my life that are part of Him, because He's omnipresent and created everything and me. So yes, worshiping God through them, and therefore they're images of God, or like channels of His goodness, etc. But I think that is, it's one thing to do that with like chocolate, or your favorite book or something, and recognize how God is expressed through that and glorified through that. But it's really gets more serious when it comes to, I don't know, I guess like your career is one thing, or people like your spouse or kids. I know even that a lot of people in like the ministry, there's perceived conflict between, or necessary to really stress out, like trying to keep a balance between your relationships with your family and then your personal like devotions and walk with God. And almost, I get the sense of almost like trying to, as if there's a conflict between your love for, say, your spouse and your kids, and your love for your God. Or as if your love for your spouse and your kids is a threat to your love for God. I have no experience or grounds on which to say this, except for scriptural principles. So in principle, I believe that if people could like grasp this, who God really is, and that, He's through everything, and in Him we live and move and have our being, as it says in Acts, they could, see their families and every part of their life as an image of God and a way to worship Him and love Him through that. Then I think that balance would become a lot easier, and like a lot of the worry about it would melt away, because it would no longer be almost a competition between Jesus and like my wife and kids. I don't believe that's how God wanted it to be, because He says that He is our Father, and like Christ in the church is the picture of marriage, and He's always using, and He is the bread and the water, and so He's always using these physical things in our lives and the people in our lives to express Himself and like teach us about Him. So bringing all of those like mundane little details, and obviously people aren't mundane, but all of our lives into like His glory and worshiping Him. So the things that you're worried about making idols, make them images of God and worship God with and through them. And I think for me, at least, that pretty much took away what used to be the like really all-consuming worry of my spiritual life.